A poor waiter spilled coffee on a millionaire CEO, but instead of getting fired, she got something no one could have ever imagined. Before we dive deeper into this emotional story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this kind of story speaks to you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It happened so fast that even Emily didn't fully understand what went wrong. 1 second, her hands were steady, her steps measured, and the tray balanced perfectly with a single cup of hot coffee resting in the center. The next, the floor betrayed her, slick from a spill no one had cleaned up. Her shoe slipped, her ankle twisted, and in a blur, the tray jerked sideways. The coffee lifted, flipped midair, and landed with a messy splash across the chest of a sharply dressed man seated at table 7. Gasps spread like a shockwave across the room. Utensils froze mid-bite, heads turned, and silence fell like a heavy curtain. The cafe, which had been buzzing just moments before, felt like a paused photograph. And Emily, she didn't even dare to breathe. The man rose slowly, the front of his charcoal suit soaked, the linen darkened by the steaming liquid. He didn't speak. He didn't move to wipe it off. He simply looked up, eyes calm but unreadable, and Emily's terrified stare. Only then did she realize who he was. Isaac Wells, the CEO, not just of the restaurant she worked in, but of the entire hospitality group. A man whispered about in the hallways, the kind of figure who didn't just sign paychecks, he signed destinies. Emily froze. Her heart pounded so loudly in her ears that she couldn't hear the manager approaching until her voice cut through the room like a blade. "Are you out of your mind?" Kate Lewis barked, storming out of her office in her usual 2 high heels. "Do you realize what you've done? Do you even understand who this man is?" Emily tried to speak, but her mouth was dry. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. There was something on the floor. I slipped and—" Kate didn't care. "You should have been watching where you were going. I knew hiring someone like you was a mistake. You just embarrassed this entire establishment." The sting of humiliation flushed Emily's face. Everyone was watching. Co-workers, customers, even the kitchen staff peeking from behind the swinging doors. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and vanish into the tile. But still, Isaac hadn't said a word. He stood quietly, eyes still locked on hers. There was no anger in his expression, but no warmth either. Just stillness, calculating, observing. Then finally his lips parted. "What's your name?" he asked, voice low and even. Emily blinked. My name?" He nodded once. "Emily," she whispered. "Emily Wilton." For a few seconds, he just looked at her, and then, completely defying every expectation in the room, he said, "I'd like another cup of coffee, Emily." Kate nearly choked. "Sir, she's a waitress. She doesn't prepare drinks. She doesn't even know how to operate the espresso machine. We have trained staff for that." Isaac's tone didn't change. "I want her to make it." Kate stood speechless, her mouth open but empty of words. Isaac gave no explanation, no further instruction, just turned and sat back down as if nothing had happened. Emily didn't move right away. Her legs were still shaking. But eventually, she turned and walked toward the back kitchen, passing coworkers who looked at her like she was walking into a firing squad. No one offered to help. No one said a word. She stepped behind the counter where the espresso machine stood like a beast she'd never dared to touch. The barista on duty glanced at her with a smirk. "You know what you're doing?" he asked, not unkindly. Emily didn't answer. She didn't know, not really, but she remembered. Not from the restaurant. Not from her job. She remembered the tiny kitchen in her mother's apartment, the faded blue mug that always smelled of cinnamon, the kettle's soft whistle, the way her mother's hands moved, slow, patient, loving, stirring warmth into something simple, and that memory guided her fingers. She ground the beans slowly, let the aroma rise and fill her lungs. She steamed the milk gently, added a touch of sugar, and just before she poured, she reached for the jar of cinnamon near the edge of the counter. She didn't measure it, just pinched the exact amount her mother used to. And when she walked out with the cup, holding it like something sacred, the room was still quiet. Isaac looked up. Emily approached, placed the cup gently on the table, and took a step back. He lifted the cup, brought it to his lips, and sipped. He closed his eyes, then opened them again. A small smile curled at the edge of his mouth, just barely there, but unmistakable. "This," he said quietly, "is the best coffee I've ever had." Kate looked like she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She glanced around the room, hoping someone would back her up, but the staff only stared, unsure whether to be shocked, impressed, or terrified. A few whispered quietly, eyes darting between Emily and Isaac. Even the barista, still behind the counter, blinked like he was trying to figure out if this was real life. Emily stood still, unsure what to do with herself. She hadn't expected praise, let alone from the man who could shut down this entire location with a single phone call. She expected anger. She expected punishment. But instead she got a compliment. A calm, simple compliment that carried more weight than any apology she could have given. Isaac didn't say anything else. He stood up slowly, adjusted his cufflinks, and gave Kate a nod that said the conversation was over before it even began. Then he walked out, leaving behind a silence that lingered in the air long after the door shut behind him. Emily returned to work, but everything felt different. She felt eyes on her, not the mocking, dismissive kind she was used to. This time, there was confusion, curiosity, resentment maybe. But something had shifted. She didn't sleep that night. Her mind replayed the moment over and over, the spill, the silence, the strange request, and that smile. That faint, rare smile from a man who wasn't known for smiling at all. What did it mean? She didn't have to wait long for answers. The very next day, just as the late morning rush was beginning to die down, the front doors opened, and Isaac Wells walked in. This time there was no coffee order, no fanfare. He didn't even sit down. He walked straight to Kate, who visibly stiffened the moment she saw him. "I need to speak with Emily," he said, his voice just as calm and commanding as ever. Kate hesitated. "Sir, she's on her break." Isaac didn't even blink. "Then go get her." Moments later, Emily was called from the back storage area where she'd been folding napkins. Her hands still smelled faintly of lemon sanitizer when she walked out and saw him standing there. She froze. "Come with me," he said. He didn't take her far, just to the side hallway, away from the others. There was no chair, no formal talk, just him and her. "I want you assisting the kitchen staff," he said. "Starting today." Emily's brows lifted. "Sir, I've already cleared it with regional. You'll be trained on site, supervised. I want to see what else you can do." She stared at him. This had to be a mistake. She didn't belong in the kitchen. Not the official one, not the place with professional chefs and schedules and expectations. She was a waitress, a struggling girl who stumbled into a job to help raise her little brother. She never even finished community college. "But I've never worked in a professional kitchen before," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He looked at her. That same quiet stare. Not cold, not warm, just focused. "Neither did I," he replied. And with that, he walked off. Kate was waiting when Emily returned to the main floor, and it was clear the news had already reached her. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath. "Absolutely ridiculous." Emily didn't respond. She didn't even look at her. She just walked past, put away her apron, and entered the kitchen she'd never dared step into. It was loud, hot, a world of its own. Knives clacked against cutting boards, pans sizzled on the stove, and commands were shouted like it was a military camp. The head chef, a tough, broad man named Theo, raised an eyebrow when she stepped in. "You're the new experiment?" he asked, arms folded. Emily nodded. "Yes, sir." "Well, the boss said you're to assist, not burn the place down. So stay out of the way, keep your mouth shut, and if you're going to cry, do it in the freezer." He handed her a stack of ingredients and told her to prepare something simple, a chicken stew. That's it, nothing fancy. Emily took the ingredients and found a corner near the prep table. As she worked, she didn't think about perfection. She didn't think about pressure or judgment or the voices outside. She thought about her mother. She thought about cold nights, warm meals, laughter between bites. She remembered the smell of garlic and olive oil, the rhythm of chopping carrots, the taste of herbs crushed by hand. She remembered the stew her mother used to make when the bills piled up, hearty, filling, and comforting. A reminder that love didn't need to be expensive to be powerful. She recreated it exactly, with just a hint of rosemary and a squeeze of lemon at the end to brighten the flavor. She plated it modestly, wiped the edges clean, and left it on the pass. Theo tasted it, and for a second he said nothing. Then, without looking at her, he grunted, "Not bad." But the real surprise came from the customers. One woman asked for the chef, said the stew reminded her of home, of childhood, of things she hadn't felt in years. When Theo pointed to Emily, the woman blinked in disbelief. Others began asking questions. Who made this? It tastes different today. Is this a new recipe? Emily didn't respond. She just kept cooking. Quietly, carefully, lovingly. And in the far corner of the dining room, at a familiar table near the window, Isaac sat watching. He said nothing to her that afternoon, didn't even call her over. But later that night, in his private journal, he wrote a single sentence in bold ink. Found something special. It was strange how quickly things changed. In just a few days, Emily had gone from the girl who spilled coffee on the CEO to the one everyone suddenly noticed. She was no longer invisible, no longer blending quietly into the background. People saw her now, but not always in the way she hoped. With every passing day, her confidence grew. Her hands became steadier, her instincts sharper. The kitchen didn't feel so foreign anymore. She had found her rhythm, chopping, sautéing, seasoning, each movement guided by memory and care. There were moments when she forgot the noise around her and simply cooked, as if the food were speaking a language only she understood. But while the dishes improved, the atmosphere didn't. The whispers began subtly, a glance here, a shrug there. But it wasn't long before they grew louder, bolder, more cutting. In the kitchen, some co-workers rolled their eyes the moment she walked in. Others grew quiet whenever she passed. Conversations paused, then resumed with different tones. In the break room, she once walked in and the laughter stopped altogether, replaced by a silence that screamed louder than words. "She's not even qualified," one of the line cooks muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. "It's obvious why the boss likes her," another added. Then came the worst of them all, a sentence she never expected to hear, and one she would never forget. Probably warming his bed after hours. The words hit her like a slap. She didn't react. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, holding her apron, pretending not to care. But inside, something sank, deeper than embarrassment. It was that familiar ache, the one she thought she had left behind when Isaac gave her that chance. She told herself they were just jealous, that she hadn't done anything wrong, that her food, not her face, was what earned her this opportunity. But even her own mind didn't always believe that. Later that week, she was passing by the manager's office when she overheard Kate on the phone, her voice low, sharp, and laced with resentment. "She's just a phase," Kate said. "He'll move on once he gets bored. They always do." Emily stood in the hallway, unseen, a tray of vegetables in her hands, her stomach twisted. That night, back in their small apartment, she tried to smile for Josh. She helped him with his schoolwork, cooked him dinner, and listened to his story about a class project on space. He was excited, innocent, safe. But when he wasn't looking, when he got up to grab his notebook from the room, her smile fell. She sat alone at the table, the fork in her hand unmoving, the food untouched. She stared at the plate in front of her, perfectly cooked, lovingly made, and wondered if it even mattered. If people would ever see her for who she really was. Not a mistake, not a rumor, not someone's phase. Just Emily. And in that moment of silence, with only the hum of the refrigerator in the background and the sound of her brother's footsteps down the hall, she let a single tear roll down her cheek. Then she wiped it, stood up, and quietly washed the dishes. Because tomorrow she had to walk back in, head high, heart guarded, and keep cooking anyway. It was almost 10 p.m. when the last of the staff finally clocked out. The kitchen, once alive with clattering pans and sharp voices, had settled into stillness. Most of the lights were off, and only the faint hum of the walk-in fridge remained. But one small lamp still glowed over the prep counter, casting a soft yellow light across the steel surfaces. And there she was. Emily stood at the far end of the kitchen, wiping down the counter for the third time. There was no more mess, no crumbs. Nothing to clean, really. But her hand moved slowly, cloth in palm, scrubbing away things that had nothing to do with food. The comments, the stares, the weight of always having to prove she belonged. She didn't hear the door open behind her. She didn't notice the quiet footsteps until a voice cut gently through the silence. "Why do you stay late?" She turned, startled, but not afraid. It was him. Isaac stood at the entrance, coat in hand, his expression unreadable as always, but his voice wasn't cold. It was curious, sincere. Emily hesitated, then gave a small shrug. Because it's the only time I'm not in anyone's way. He didn't speak right away, just walked in slowly and placed his coat on the back of a chair. Then he sat, folding his hands on the table. "You don't have to stay in the shadows, you know," he said. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed gently. "It's easier. People talk less when they forget you're there." "Do you care what they say?" She smiled, but there was no joy in it, just truth. "I wish I didn't." A long silence followed, not uncomfortable, but heavy, like two people standing at the edge of something neither knew how to name. And then she started to talk. Not because he asked her to, but because something about the quiet, the dim light, and the way he listened made her feel like it was safe. Just for a moment. She told him about her mother, how she passed away 2 years ago from a heart condition they couldn't afford to treat properly. She spoke about her father, who left when she was 12 and never came back, and about Josh, her little brother, her reason for waking up in the morning, her anchor when everything else felt like it was slipping away. "He's only 10, she said, her voice soft. "He still asks about our dad sometimes. I tell him he's probably traveling. I don't know if that's a lie or just hope." Isaac listened, his gaze steady. "I wanted to go to culinary school," she continued, "but after Mom passed, I couldn't. Someone had to take care of him, so I took the first job I could find that offered evening shifts and free staff meals." She smiled again, this time a little more real. "And here I am, the waitress who spilled coffee on a billionaire." For a long time, Isaac said nothing, just looked at her, not in judgment, but as if trying to understand the blueprint of her entire life from those few sentences. "You know," he finally said, "some of the greatest chefs I've met didn't come from schools." She looked at him, surprised. "They came from hunger," he said, "from pain, and from purpose." And then he stood, picked up his coat, walked a few steps toward the door, and paused. Without turning around, he said just one thing. "Pack your bags. You're going to Paris." And then he walked out, leaving her standing there in that soft yellow light, completely speechless. At first, Emily thought it was just something he said to be kind. A moment of generosity, maybe. Something rich people threw around when they felt moved by someone else's story. "You're going to Paris." It echoed in her head for days, but she didn't dare believe it. Not really. But then, 4 days later, something strange happened. A delivery man arrived at the restaurant holding a sleek envelope with gold lining and her name handwritten in elegant script. Everyone in the kitchen turned to look. Even Kate paused mid-conversation when she saw it. Emily opened it slowly, her hands trembling slightly, and inside was a letter so crisp and official it barely felt real. The heading read, "Culinary Talent Summit, Paris, France." Below that, in bold lettering, "Congratulations, Emily Wilton. You have been selected to represent the Wells Hospitality Group at this year's International Showcase of Emerging Culinary Talent." Her breath caught in her throat. She read it once, then again, then a third time, just to be sure. It wasn't a joke. Isaac meant every word he said. She carried the letter home like it was glass, delicate, precious, too unreal to hold. And when she stepped through the door of their small apartment, Josh looked up from the couch and saw her face before she even said a word. "What happened?" he asked, eyes wide. "I got invited to Paris," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Josh blinked. "Paris? Like the Paris? With the Eiffel Tower?" Emily nodded. He jumped to his feet. "Are you serious? That's amazing!" But she didn't smile. She sat down on the couch, the letter still in her hands. I can't go," she said quietly. Josh's grin faded. "Why not?" "I can't leave you here alone, Josh. Who's going to pack your lunch or help you with homework or—" He cut her off. "Emily, I'm 10. I can survive a few days." "It's not just a few days. It's Paris. It's thousands of miles away. What if something happens? What if I mess up? What if I go there and embarrass myself in front of people who've been doing this for years?" Josh sat beside her, looked up with those same soft brown eyes she remembered from when he was a baby. "Mom used to say your food could change the world," he said. "Maybe this is where it starts." The room went quiet after that. Emily didn't speak. She just stared at the letter in her lap, the gold seal, the neat folds, the impossible opportunity, and the little boy beside her who believed in her even when she didn't. That night, after dinner, she tucked Josh into bed like she always did. She turned off the lights, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Good night, troublemaker." He smiled with his eyes closed. "Good night, Chef Emily." And after he drifted off to sleep, she stood in the hallway for a long time, just looking at the open door of their shared room, listening to the sound of his breathing. Then she turned away, walked into the tiny closet they shared, and quietly she began to pack. Word traveled fast, as it always did in places where ambition ran thicker than loyalty. By morning, nearly everyone in the restaurant knew Emily had been invited to represent the Wells Group at an international culinary summit in Paris, of all places. Some clapped quietly when she walked by. Others offered tight-lipped smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. But Kate wasn't smiling at all. She stormed into Isaac's office just after noon, the door flung open without a knock, her heels slicing across the tile like a threat. Isaac sat at his desk, flipping through a thin folder, completely unfazed. "You can't be serious," she snapped, before he could even look up. "You're sending her to represent us? A waitress, with no credentials, no formal training, no title, nothing?" Isaac looked up slowly, calmly, and closed the folder. "Good afternoon, Kate." But she wasn't in the mood for niceties. Her face was tight with barely contained fury. "I've worked in this company for 9 years. I've trained chefs who graduated top of their class. We have dozens of qualified staff who would kill for this kind of opportunity. And you hand it to a girl who couldn't even walk a tray straight a week ago?" Isaac leaned back in his chair, hands folded neatly in his lap. "You said she didn't know how to make coffee," he replied. Kate blinked, thrown off for a moment. "What does that have to do with anything?" "That cup changed my life." His words hung in the air like a weight. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shift in his seat. But something in his tone silenced the room more effectively than any shouting ever could. Kate's jaw clenched. "She's not ready. She's going to crash and burn in front of world-class chefs. This is a reputation risk for you, for all of us." Isaac's eyes never left hers. "And if I had listened to every voice that told me I wasn't ready, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair." She took a breath, grounding herself for one final push. "You're making a mistake." A long pause. Then Isaac leaned forward slightly and said in a voice quiet but firm, "If believing in someone is a mistake, then I'll keep making them." Kate had nothing left to say. She turned on her heel and walked out, her silence louder than anything she could have argued. And Isaac? He reopened the folder on his desk, flipped to the second page, and scribbled a note beside Emily's name. All in. The sky was still dark when Emily and Isaac arrived at the small private terminal. She had never been this close to a jet before, let alone boarded one. The aircraft gleamed beneath the lights, sleek and quiet like a secret, and as the steps extended from its belly, she hesitated for a second, just long enough to feel the weight of where she came from. Isaac stood beside her, calm as ever. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, just never thought I'd be flying anywhere but coach, or at all." He gave a faint smile, then led the way. Inside, the plane was almost unreal. Cream-colored leather seats, a long, polished table, soft lighting that made everything feel like a movie set. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap as they took off, trying not to stare out the window like a child on her first school trip. But when the wheels finally left the ground and the clouds swallowed them in gold-tinted mist, she let herself breathe, just a little. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't standing on shaky ground. She was flying. Paris greeted them with a cool breeze and the subtle scent of fresh bread and street-roasted coffee beans. The city glowed, even in the morning light, elegant and old, like it had seen centuries of stories and was ready to witness one more. But for Emily, the beauty came with something else, pressure. Heavy, invisible, and constant. The Culinary Talent Summit was more than a cooking contest. It was an event attended by some of the most respected chefs in the world, people who had studied in France, Italy, Japan, people who had Michelin stars and television shows. And now, Emily Wilton from a backstreet cafe was one of them. The hotel was beautiful, too beautiful, with marble floors and gold accents and chandeliers that looked like frozen fireworks. In her room, she stood at the window, looking out at the Eiffel Tower in the distance. It blinked softly against the skyline, majestic and quiet. She whispered to herself, "What am I doing here?" It didn't feel real. It felt like she was walking through someone else's life, someone who belonged in chef coats and gourmet kitchens and press conferences, Someone who didn't carry the weight of unpaid bills, lost parents, and whispered insults from jealous coworkers. But she didn't let the doubt win. Instead, she practiced. Morning and night, she stood in the hotel's guest kitchen, repeating every step of the dish she had chosen to present. It was one her mother used to make on special occasions, the kind of recipe that wasn't fancy but felt sacred. Spiced lamb, slow roasted with cloves and cinnamon, a fig sauce made from scratch, sweet and dark and rich, rosemary potatoes roasted until crisp but soft in the center. Each part of the dish held a memory, a smell, a story. She worked on the details until her hands knew the movements better than her mind. Isaac visited once or twice, offering quiet encouragement, but mostly he let her be. Let her fight the battle in her own way, because this wasn't just about food. It was about worth. And Emily was determined. If she was going to fall, she would do it, giving everything she had. The morning of the summit arrived with a heaviness in the air, the kind that lives in big days, the kind that wraps itself around your chest before you even open your eyes. Emily woke up before sunrise, her heart already racing. Her palms were damp before her feet even touched the hotel floor. She stared at herself in the mirror for a long time after getting dressed, barely recognizing the reflection. Her chef coat was crisp, borrowed from the event organizers, but the name stitched on the front, E. Wilton, felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone braver. The venue was breathtaking. A grand culinary institute tucked in the heart of Paris, with ivy curling around the gates and a fountain humming softly in the courtyard. Inside, the walls were lined with portraits of culinary legends, men and women who had defined generations of cuisine. The air smelled of butter, citrus zest, ambition, and nerves. Chefs from 20 different countries had arrived, each one carrying years of experience, framed certificates, and the sharp confidence that came with knowing they were good, and knowing the world knew it too. Some had television crews following them. Others had entire teams prepping behind them. There were translators, photographers, press badges. Emily had none of that. Just herself, and a recipe passed down from her mother. She walked quietly to her station, her heart thudding against her ribs. She tried to block out the voices, the laughter in French and Italian, the flash of cameras. She didn't want to compare. She couldn't afford to. Because while they had schools and sponsors, Emily had heart and history, and a promise to herself that she wouldn't back down just because she felt small. As the day unfolded, the kitchen turned into a ballet of fire and steel. Flames danced from pans, knives moved in a blur. Steam rose from pots like ghosts, whispering in every language. Chefs shouted, stirred, plated, and judges walked slowly through the rows, taking notes, tasting bites, murmuring to one another in hushed, unreadable tones. Emily waited her turn. She didn't rush. She didn't watch the others. She just moved with the rhythm she knew, the rhythm she'd practiced in silence. Her lamb roasted slowly, tender and rich with spice. The fig sauce simmered until it turned glossy and deep. The rosemary potatoes came out golden, crisp, the air around her station filled with warmth and familiarity. When it was time to plate, her hands shook. But she remembered what her mother once told her. When your hands shake, it just means your heart cares. So she kept moving. Her dish was the last to be judged, the final presentation of the day. By then, the room had quieted. The crowd had thinned. Fatigue hung in the air like the end of a long song. Emily stood behind her table, her arms gently folded in front of her, eyes fixed on the plate, as if looking at the judges would unravel her. 3 of them approached. One was French, one Italian. The third, an older woman from Morocco with eyes that missed nothing. None of them smiled. The French judge lifted his fork, took a bite of the lamb, chewed slowly. He didn't speak. The Italian followed, dipping into the fig sauce, then tasting the potatoes. Still, no reaction. Finally, the woman with the keen eyes tasted everything, then set her fork down and looked directly at Emily. No nod, no word, just a pause. And then they moved on. Emily didn't breathe. Not really. She stood frozen for several more minutes, her heart begging for release from the storm inside her chest. She watched as the final scores were tallied, as judges whispered to one another, as an announcer stepped onto the platform. People gathered around again, murmuring. Some had already picked their favorites, and Emily could hear a few guesses being tossed around in French and English. Probably the Italian chef with the truffle risotto. That woman from Tokyo. Hers was so elegant. Who was that American girl again? Oh, she's not American. Think she was local staff. That's what I heard. And then the voice of the host cut through the air. Ladies and gentlemen, after careful deliberation, the judges have reached a decision. The room stilled. The winner of this year's Rising Star Culinary Award is, a long pause, Emily Wilton. For a full second, there was nothing. Just quiet, stunned, breathless, like the world forgot to move. And then the applause came. Thunderous, explosive, waves of it. Some people looked surprised, others clapped slowly. A few rose to their feet, cameras flashed. Emily stood there in shock, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. It was as if the world had tilted sideways. When the host gestured toward her, she stepped forward, legs trembling under the weight of disbelief. She barely heard the words of praise that followed, barely saw the faces. All she could feel was the sound of her mother's voice in her head, repeating something she hadn't heard in years. You were born with something special. It's not about recipes, it's about feeling, love, memory. If you lead with that, they'll taste your heart in every bite. And in front of a crowd she never thought she'd stand before, Emily Wilton, the waitress who once spilled coffee on a billionaire, burst into tears. Not from sadness, not from fear, but from the kind of joy that comes when someone who never thought they'd be seen is finally seen. The applause still echoed in her ears hours after the ceremony had ended. Even as the lights dimmed and the crowd dispersed and the stage was cleared, Emily remained wrapped in a surreal daze, not just from the victory, but from the journey that had led her here. She had walked into that kitchen as a nobody. She was leaving as something else, not just a name on a trophy, but a story that people would whisper about in hallways and write about in magazines. And yet, even with the weight of her achievement settling in, there was one thing she didn't expect: the quiet invitation from Isaac later that evening. He didn't say where they were going, just that she should wear something nice, something that made her feel like herself. The hotel concierge handed her a box, a simple, elegant black dress folded neatly inside. No tags, no receipt, just the right size, just thoughtful. As they stepped into the car, the streets of Paris glowed like a dream outside the window. The city was alive with music and golden light, lovers walking hand in hand along the sidewalks, laughter echoing down narrow cobblestone lanes. Emily looked out in silence, her heart still racing, not from nerves this time, but from something warmer, deeper. The car pulled up to a discreet rooftop restaurant overlooking the Seine. From the terrace, the view was breathtaking. Bridges stretching across the river like arms reaching for something just out of sight, boats gliding gently under moonlight, and in the distance, the Eiffel Tower glowing like a giant heartbeat in the night. They sat at a quiet table tucked into the corner. No press, no audience, just the two of them. For a long while, they didn't talk. They just watched the water move and the stars blink above the skyline. Then Isaac spoke. "You know," he said softly, "when I first saw you, I thought you were just another employee." Emily smiled a little, eyes still on the river. "Most days I thought that too." He looked at her now, not like a CEO sizing up a resume, but like a man seeing someone fully, maybe for the first time. "But your strength," he continued, "your humility, your fire, it changed me." She turned to him, searching his face. "I built this company because I wanted to create something people would remember, but somewhere along the way I forgot what it felt like to feel, to be moved by something real. You reminded me of that." She didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. She gasped before it even opened. "I didn't plan this," he said, "but maybe life doesn't need a perfect plan. Maybe it just needs a perfect moment." He opened the box slowly, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, timeless, much like her. "Emily," he said gently, "will you marry me?" The world fell silent. The laughter from across the rooftop, the sound of glasses clinking, the rush of wind over the Seine, it all faded. She stared at him, stunned. For the first time in her life, words failed her. There were too many feelings, too many memories, too many moments flashing before her all at once. The spilled coffee, the judgmental whispers, the nights she cried in silence, the meals she cooked with nothing but love and hope. And now, this. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they didn't sting. She looked at him, her voice trembling, and whispered, "Yes, yes, I will." Time has a way of softening even the sharpest memories. The sting of spilled coffee, the whispers in break rooms, the weight of insecurity, all of it slowly faded into something else, something quieter, something beautiful. Months after the summit in Paris, Emily stood once again in a kitchen, but this time it wasn't borrowed space, it was hers. The logo above the entrance read, "Wilton Table, a culinary line by Emily Wilton." A joint venture under the Wells Group, her own brand, her own menu, her own vision brought to life. And inside? It didn't feel like a restaurant, it felt like home. The shelves were lined with ingredients her mother once used. The recipes weren't flashy, but they were rich in meaning. There were no complicated foams or molecular experiments, just warmth, memory, heart, and people responded to it. Reviews poured in, critics raved, not just about the food, but about the story. Because Emily's name didn't come with a degree or a 5-star resume, it came with grit, with kindness, with a truth people could taste. But it wasn't just her food that was changing lives. She began speaking at youth centers, visiting schools, sharing her journey with girls who, like her, came from nowhere. Girls who cooked because they had to. Girls who saw food not as an art, but as survival. She told them they mattered, that their stories mattered, that sometimes the most powerful recipes are written not in cookbooks, but in struggle. And Josh, he thrived. He was enrolled in one of the best schools in the country, top-notch teachers, art clubs, science fairs, a future he could now dream about freely. Every morning, he left the house with a full backpack, notebooks, pencils, and homemade snacks packed with love from his sister's new test kitchen. Banana muffins, herb crackers, apple slices with cinnamon, and a tiny note inside that always read, "For the brightest boy in the room." He'd smile every time he opened it. As for Kate, there was no confrontation, no big fall from grace, no apology, just a quiet transfer to another branch. No farewell party, no framed photo, just silence. Like a chapter that ends without a final sentence, not because it was satisfying, but because it no longer mattered. Bitterness, it turns out, doesn't age well. It spoils quietly and is eventually discarded. And Isaac? He remained exactly what he had become, her biggest cheerleader, her partner in every sense of the word, the quiet strength behind her courage. They didn't chase the spotlight. They didn't pose for magazine covers. Instead, they spent evenings on their balcony, drinking tea, sharing ideas, and watching Josh grow. Every so often, someone would mention that old story, the one about the girl who spilled coffee on the CEO, and Isaac would smile, because he remembered the weight of that cup, the silence of that moment, the look in her eyes when she braced herself for the worst, and instead received the beginning of something extraordinary. And in the privacy of their home, when no cameras were rolling and no critics were watching, he would look at her, truly look, and say, "You saved my life that day." She would laugh, shake her head, and say, "I ruined your shirt," and then they'd go back to cooking, together. And here brings us to the end of the story. If this touched you in any way, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to Humanity Stories, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you truly enjoyed the journey, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Your words matter more than you know.